And just to start off by saying thank you to Evelyn and Katie and Aoife for the invitation to talk to you all today. I've done a few of these kind of presentations for them over the years, but this is, I think, my first one in person since 2019, I'm going to say. So it feels really nice to not be in my kitchen on Zoom. And of course, thank you to the Dance Limerick team for having us here as well. For those of you who don't know Ormston House, we're just down the road. We're on the corner of Patrick Street and Ellen Street, and we occupy this building. We're a small organisation. We define ourselves as a meeting place for the arts. Our programme is co-designed with artists and citizens, resulting in community partnerships, multi-annual projects and cultural events that are responsive to the city and its context. We've developed a participatory model that is connected that connect curatorial practice with local knowledge and activism. And again, we're part of a number of national networks and international networks. The national networks being the Irish Network Against Racism, the Irish Museums Association, and the Public Participation Network. Our European networks are the Artist Run Network Europe, which is formerly the AIM Network, which I'm going to speak about in a few minutes, and Trans Europe Pals, which is another European network that we're part of, that again I'll speak on later. And if you are in Limerick for the day, please do call down to us. We're open. Well, we are open now. I'm not there, but we are open, and we're currently hosting EVA International, which is a wonderful exhibition across 17 venues in the city. Capacity has kind of come up in kind of the various presentations prior to this. In particular, Katie kind of highlighted it. And just to speak on our own capacity, we're a tiny team. We currently have 2 part-time employees and 2 CE scheme workers. We obviously expand the team at different points. Usually our team is 3 employees, but there's an ongoing recruitment process at the moment. So we will have a new team member joining in the next couple of months. But we never thought that we were an organisation that could tackle Creative Europe or tackle being part of larger European networks. And it's something through the kind of getting in touch with other kind of our kind of peer network internationally, but also organisations that are connected and interested in the same sort of areas of research that we are, that we ended up building those kind of more from 2020 up until 2023. You'll probably notice the dates as well. We sort of ended one project within a pandemic and started another in a pandemic, which has had its own challenges. So just to kind of, I suppose, give a bit of a background to the first network that I'll speak to, the AIM Network, or Artist Initiative Meetings. It was started a number of years ago by a group of artists and arts organisations that met at an independent art fair in Stockholm called Supermarket. And they realised that there was kind of a need for a European wide network of artist-run initiatives that could, you know, that had similar values, that had similar ways of working, that had a similar ethos, and similar capacities, but in different contexts, and starting a very much around a basis of friendship and on an informal basis. And they developed the AIM network. That was how it was born, I guess. We joined in late 2017, and the first time we were able to kind of come together as a group was in 2019, in that very cheesy photo of us in Plovdiv during the European Capital of Culture in 2019. The AIM network has grown since. There's about, I think, 16 partners now. You can see that on the map there, there's a few dots and a few pins of where we're located. So generally speaking, there's one kind of artist-run initiative or one artist-led space. An alliance and the Alternative Art Guide that kind of have a much more global focus. Through this network, we were able to kind of come in various projects. one of them being the artist-run Network Europe project, which is our most recent Creative Europe project. Once this project, it only wrapped a few months ago, and we've reported on it at the Creative Europe level, so it's still very much in my head. But we had 7 full partners and 3 associate partners. So again, we had a lead partner in Candyland in Stockholm, ourselves, LTMKS in Lithuania. We had TOP in Berlin, the Syndicate of Creatures in Copenhagen, the Alternative Art Guide in The Hague, and Total Dobja in Riga. And then our associate partners were Juxtapose Art Fair, Supermarket Independent Art Fair, and Consfac. Again, a very, very diverse kind of group of artist-run initiatives. We all have a slightly different way of working or a different kind of focus on our programme, but it kind of came together in terms of this project. And I have to say, like when I think about this project, you know, we were granted funding in May 2020, and obviously what we applied for was drastically different to what we could actually deliver at the time, and that had its own challenges. And things were adapted, timelines were shifted, and that was just part of it, and I think part of all of our work at the time. But just to kind of touch on our priorities that we kind of hit at the time. So that was hugely important. A lot of it was around upskilling and training. And you can see our kind of the aims of the project there as well. But I have to say, like, again, thinking about networks, the AIM network has taken Artist-Run Network Europe as its name. So its AIM is now ARNI. It's a terrible acronym, but it's one that we're stuck with, I'm afraid. We've printed the tote bags, so you know we're stuck with it for another while. But it was an incredible kind of network it is an incredible network to be part of, because it is it's a peer network. It's built around, I think, a lot of trust and a lot of friendship that does come out of these networks, and I think that's really, really important, especially when you're a smaller scale organisation. It allows you to kind of develop relationships in a very real way and a very personal way, which sometimes is really key in realising a lot of these like bigger projects. It doesn't come without its problems, of course, as well, when you know that those personal lines, those professional lines can kind of blur, and people are kind of easily offended sometimes, and people get hurt along the way if things aren't going the way they are. And I think anyone who's undertaken a Creative Europe project knows that, you know, cooperation is really key, and it's part of it, and learning how to cooperate and learning how to work with each other is really, really important. But it's just allowed us to, I suppose, expand our thinking as an organisation, like identify key partners within the networks, and for the organisations that we're visiting as part of network meetings that we want to work with, whether it's through residencies, whether it's through co-commissioning and co-curating as well. And just to kind of touch, while we talk about value, one of the main activities that Ormston House was responsible for this project was looking at the social value of the artist-run sector and developing this blueprint that helps artist-run and independent organisations and smaller scale organisations through kind of a step-by-step guide for articulating the value of artist-run. So we've published that. It's available on our website. That's free to download, and we will be printing a hard copy of it as well. Obviously, the Arts Council have an incredible framework there, but we always felt that this kind of learning, it's suited to larger organisations with larger capacities that we just don't have, and we wanted to have like a very practical kind of set of questions and a practical methodology that independent spaces or people that are new to kind of social value learning can just take and run with it, and hopefully kind of develop their own methodology through it. So that's kind of one of our kind of activities that we were able to realise. The next network that I will speak about is Trans Europe HALS. It is a huge organisation and a huge network. Some of you are probably familiar with it already. It was founded in 1983, has over 140 members across 40 European countries. We are probably one of the smallest organisations within that network. Again, some of these these spaces are like massive cultural centres all across Europe, and really, really impressive. And it is a very impressive network, I have to say, and one that we feel very fortunate to be part of. Building a building that's been repurposed for cultural use. So a lot of like post-industrial buildings, a lot of heritage buildings, and then of course arts is the other pillar. Just in terms of a cultural and arts focus. They aim to connect, to support, and advocate. Connecting in terms of, there's usually 2 conferences or 2 meetings a year. One around the kind of late spring, early summer. This year it was in Leipzig, and then a camp meeting, which is a smaller scale meeting that's usually held in kind of October, kind of November time. So that one is in Georgia. I think it's next week actually. I won't be going, unfortunately, this time. It's an incredible network. My slides on it are actually very boring and dry, so I apologise, but they have a really dynamic website that I'll point to in a minute. But becoming a member, it can be quite a lengthy process. It's a 10-step process, and there's certain criteria that you do kind of have to hit. Obviously, to be a non-governmental organisation or private enterprise, so you can't be kind of already kind of like a municipal space or something like that. It has to be independent. You have to have a legal structure. You have to have at least 2 years. You be at least 2 years old. Community-led, independent. I mean, I'm sure you can read all of this, and Evelyn will, I'm sure, will circulate the slides afterwards. But it is, it's a long process, but it ensures that everyone going forward is both suitable to be part of the network, but also it can get the most benefit from the network, that they are aligned in terms of their ethos. Different organisations as well. There's different hubs within the network, because again, with a network of over 140 members, it might feel a bit daunting, or how could you possibly connect or make connections? It's quite a vast network. But there's a youth hub, so for organisations with younger teams. There's regionally focused hubs as well. So one in the kind of around the Baltic regions, one in the Nordics. So they do focus on particular areas. There's a huge focus as well around, I suppose, capacity building for other networks. They do a lot of staffing exchanges. There's a lot of opportunities for residencies and to move around as well. So it's a really interesting and really beneficial network to be part of. Again, these are kind of some of the benefits. Everything from advocacy and help to kind of helping with grant writing applications, and just as well, They do kind of feed into a lot of governmental policies at a European level and national levels. Something as well that we kind of found the benefit of is that, if you occupy a space, which is one of their criteria, that had another purpose, or it's a repurposed building, there's a lot of insecurity with that a lot of the time. Like, most people aren't lucky enough to have a long-term lease or own their building outright. And one of the kind of factors, especially with changing economies and changing landscapes, is people are being pushed out of their space, whether it's through increasing costs or landlords kind of moving on or wanting to sell or change the purpose of a building for cultural use. So there's been a lot of conversations around supporting those kind of activities, and there is a huge network of people there that have that experience at different levels, dealing with like national governments or local governments. Something as well that's really impressive about Trans Europe Pals in recent years is their response to the war in Ukraine, which seems like a little bit removed, and we're a little bit removed in Ireland, but it was a very direct support system that was put in place by Trans Europe Pals. Both for the organisations that are based in Ukraine, but in the regions, everything from creating space, opening up residency spaces for people to move. and getting support to organisations in Ukraine. So it's just been kind of a really kind of incredible network to see how something as critical as a war in Europe can actually, you know, how they can have an impact and how they can support other organisations and individuals. I'm not going to jump into their website, but I will say their Trans Europe Health website, it's far more dynamic and interesting than any of my slides. And it does go through like all of the members, the different European projects that they're part of. There's, you know, some really, really incredible projects around capacity building, around organisational development, a lot of policy templates, a lot of policy work there as well. So it is definitely a website as a resource it's one to go through. And I suppose for me, like always coming back to this question, and value has been kind of part of my research and a lot of my work for the last number of years, thanks to our Creative Europe project. So in terms of the value for these, being part of these networks, I think as a small organisation and a relatively young organisation, there's so much learning that we've been able to do, and on a personal level and on a professional level, but you know, on the organisational level. So I'm very grateful for that, and I think as well, I would always, when we talk about capacity, we always think of like, oh, we're tiny, we're from this small city in Ireland, and we're a tiny organisation within that, and thinking that we don't necessarily fit within these networks. And I think being part of them has actually shown us that we do have a seat at the table, and you know, we can contribute and we can get the benefit from it. So I would encourage anyone that is thinking of joining a network to do it. And yeah, I'm going to wrap up because I could waffle on for a long time, and I'm just about over time. But thank you very much. And if you need any more info, you can contact us. Thank you.